Hello and welcome to episode 89 of the Movies in a Podshall podcast. The podcast where we take a theme and we pick two films to fit that theme. And this week's theme is alien invasions, I guess. Somehow we've never done that before, which is so weird. As always, I'm joined by a guy who is a massive aliens conspiracy theorist himself, but you can call him John.
I'm really not. I just like science fiction.
John DeLong. Tom DeLong, like from Blink-182, is a massive aliens. Sorry,
is he?
I just opened a can of Coke.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I know John's not really an alien conspiracy theorist, to be honest.
Not that I know of. No. Do you know what though? Like we've got questions later where people are like, "What do you believe?" I'm like, "We'll delve into that later."
Do you know what?
Who knows?
I've got my tinfoil hat with me.
You got your tinfoil hat.
Yeah. This is where like it can get a bit ropey actually, because people are going to be like,
"Really?
Are they really that mental?" Like, or we could just be quite.
Are we Tim Robbins or are we Tom Cruise in War of the Worlds? That is the question.
Yeah, I was about to say, that was a good. Are we down to earth? I said, which is obviously Anyway, guess what? We've got some T-shirts, some brand new T-shirts. We've got the old zombie. Not old, but we've got the original zombie tee, and we've also got the VHS tee, Rewind or Die. You can go on moviesinapodshall.sumupstore.com and buy one of those for the lovely price of £18. I was at a gig on Friday night. Went to see a band called Neck Deep and a band called The Wonder Years, which was very good. I really loved it. £35 for a Fruit of the Loom T-shirt. Now, the only thing I will defend those bands because I love them so much, but like obviously that's the only way they make money nowadays, because me and John have been talking a lot about royalties and stuff in regards to some big well-known music
streaming services.
Yes. So obviously bands struggle to make money now unless they're going on tour and selling merch, but our merch is not Fruit of the Loom. It is high quality pre-shrunk cotton, and it's really funny because people talk to me about this all the time, about the pre-shrunk cotton. It's just one of those things. You can find us on YouTube as well. You can find us by searching Movies in a Podshall, all one word, Tony, or you can find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, where we don't get much royalties, as previously mentioned. You can find us just wherever you get your podcasts, really. But what's really important is if you would just subscribe to us, give us a thumbs up, write a little review and say, hey, the boys are one of the only podcasts on the internet that actually speak the truth. But yeah. Anyway, John, that's us,
6 out of 10 films.
That's
What's the truth? 6 out of 10 films aren't that bad. They're fine.
It's hard-hitting stuff here on the Movies in a Podshall podcast, putting the world to rights.
Dear.
But anyway, John, how have you been anyway?
All right, yeah, sorry, we are delayed a week because I still sounded a little bit coldy, but I was pretty rough last week, so apologies for the delay. It was my fault. However, I was gutted because we were really excited because Jamie and we'd done this science fiction based episode, and like we both watched the films, we were both really geared to go, so I was gutted to delay. However, we have had extra time to research and watch more behind the scenes and things, so that's good. How about yourself, Jamie? How have you been?
Yeah, fine. Yeah, really good. Yeah, what have I been doing? Anything fun? Not really. It was my birthday, so it was my birthday last Wednesday, which was nice. So yeah, I've been watching some films as always. I've got quite a big list here. A lot of Wallace and Gromit in there, which is I'm
really excited to talk to you about Wallace and Gromit because I mentioned that I'd watched the one over Christmas, and then I said to you like I'd had a day where I'd watched quite a few of them in a row. So yeah.
Well, I've done the same actually. But I just realised I haven't logged that one. But yeah, there's only one left that potentially two left that I haven't seen. But
what are they?
So I've never seen apparently the best one, which is Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Never seen that one.
Who said that was the best one?
I think that's what people.
I'm not having that.
Okay.
I like it. It's just it's not the best one. Like I think in terms of favourites, for me it's always Close Shave, Wrong Trousers. But then I don't know if that's just because as a child they are the two I saw the most. So I'm just like
is the
religious.
one I saw the most as a kid.
Yeah.
A Close Shave, I'm not sure if I've seen that, so I just have to double check. I think I probably have.
Close Shave's the one with Shaun the Sheep.
Yeah, so that's what maybe I haven't then, because
mate, so that one's got loads of motifs where it's right on my street, because there's a sequence where Wallace and Gromit are like getting ready to go into like a motorbike, and like everything's really over invented. It's the Thunderbird 2 launch sequence, but basically as Wallace and Gromit. So for me as a child that was excellent. And there's a sequence with a plane, and there's like this amazing bit of orchestral music. There's just so many. They're all filled with references, but like that one for me is just bang on. Anyway.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, so yeah, I had my birthday. Yeah, and I don't really like to make a big deal of my birthday. Really, I went to a wedding in London at the Savoy, which was very well to do. So they had a live jazz band, which was pretty cool. They had an opera. They had like an orchestra. I was saying I text John about it actually. They had like this what was it called? Choir. They had a choir, and oh my god, like it was probably one of the most emotional kind of experience I've ever had with music, I would say, and which is rare for me because I see all sorts of music all the time, but the choir was so in the church with like the reverb, the echo, and they were just spot on, and I was like, wow, this is stirring up something inside me, which is yeah, I'd try not to cry because I'm a big boy. Anyway, John, what you've been watching? You've been watching anything fun?
Some bits and pieces. So I finished Silo, which I really enjoyed, but like this actually links back to our colour grading chat, which is coming up later. Yeah, so season 2, but it's really funny. So there's a whole like Reddit forum about like how difficult season 2 is to watch because effectively one of the locations is incredibly dark, and they've gone for the whole we're lighting it as if it was only lit for real, as in there's no additional lights. But half of the season is based in here. And the director actually had to come out and talk about it, and the showrunner, and basically said, well, that's just kind of part of it because of the location, but we understand we've upset some people. Now, here's where I take issue. A few years ago, Tom Cruise and Ralph McQuarrie were like, hey, turn the picture setting on to like Dolby Vision because then it turns off any superfluous picture things that ruin an image. So the Dolby... when you go on Apple, it's like, this is the way you're supposed to watch it. Like filmmaker mode. It's like, watch it in this and don't change anything. The director's literally come out and said, yeah, just brighten your image. Don't worry about it. It's like, they've waited years to tell people to, like, make this technique to not have to change things. And then you're literally telling people to change them because you've graded it too dark. It seems nuts to me. Or you need to have 2 versions, which is... on TVs, you get like Dolby Vision Home or Dolby Vision Cinema. So cinema's obviously for if you're in a pitch black room, and home's for like a slightly brightened version. I think every show now, they should get a standard across all the stream platforms to have that, because so many people are complaining about so many shows that they just can't watch if it's not pitch black. And the truth is, like, a lot of people like watch things either in the afternoon or like they don't have access to a pitch black.
Well, they might be watching
pitch black space, you know. Yeah, so so there we are. That's my little rant about that. But in terms of the actual story and everything, I love it. And the other reason I thought was quite funny the other day, Tim Robbins is in Silo, and I didn't even know it was Tim Robbins for ages. So Tim Robbins is in the first one. We're going to talk about War of the Worlds. But what's funny is I kept saying to her, I was like, that guy's so good, he's brilliant, like, I wonder who he is. Never bothered to Google it. Wow. And then I watched a review video for War of the Worlds, and it was like, oh, and he's recently appeared in Apple TV's Silo, and I was like, oh my god,
Robbins is great.
Of course it's Tim Robbins, Mr. Shawshank Redemption. But great seeing him in Silo. He's I don't know. He's a man that holds a lot of gravitas and screen presence, and just in Silo he kind of like runs it, and I just love it. And I love Rebecca Ferguson, but I think I've said this before. But what I love about Silo is it's a really capable female hero, but it's not forced. It's like, oh, why can she do that? It's like, well, she's a mechanic. Like her whole thing is she's a mechanic and an engineer, and so there's loads of like puzzles and problem solving within the show. But it never feels like, well, how did you work out how to do that? Because the whole point is she's just very capable, and it's just good. It's just really good.
I might check it out, actually.
I think you'd like it. I don't know, though. I know sometimes with TV, if it's a bit slow, you get annoyed. And I wouldn't say it's the quickest TV show, but it's one of those shows where the lore takes time to build up to like make the mystery. Yeah.
The only thing that annoys me about TV shows when they're slow is that if there's just filler, so like an 8-episode season of something, like, why has it got to be 8 episodes when there's 3 episodes or 4 episodes worth of content? That annoys me.
I would say that I think this season was like 9 episodes, and realistically, again, it could have had 3 crammed down if I'm being really, really picky. But what I would say is Rebecca Ferguson was clearly unavailable for some of this season because she was filming something else, because there's not as much of her. And I know they have to balance the story out because there's lots of characters going on. But that gets frustrating. But anyway, I watched really randomly Star Trek Beyond because a YouTuber who I follow watches through, was watching the Star Trek films, and then I was like, I've not watched Star Trek Beyond in probably since it was released.
Nor me.
I wonder what I think about it, and I quite enjoyed it. I think It has all the problems of modern Trek in terms of being very action heavy and not much.
Well, Beyond was actually
not much
more...
intellectual sci-fi behind it, as we'll get into with
yeah
with the latter two films. But you know, it's fun, and I enjoyed it. But you're right, of those three, it's the one people kind of look at the most as like, okay,
for sure, yeah, for sure. Like, especially because it's probably the closest to the original series, isn't it? In terms of what the as an episode. I mean, it feels like an episode.
Yeah. It feels like an episode of it. Yeah,
big budget kind of thing on steroids.
I think. Yeah, it's a weird one, so I actually like the 09 one, not as keen on the second one than like the third one, but anyway, there we are. And then on top of that, I haven't watched another film? Can't remember, not come to my mind, so don't worry, James will go on to his list, and then obviously the pod films, which I loved, but we'll talk about those later.
Oh god, it's been a good time. So yeah, I've watched some good stuff. I watched some crap stuff. We'll start with the crap stuff. I watched Escape Room 2. So Escape Room Tournament of Champions. Now I see the first one. So the reason why I watched this actually was because Vicky watched the first one. She was like, "Oh, it was crap."
You mentioned this on the pod last time, mate.
Did I? Well,
yeah, you mentioned this one.
Do you know what to do then? Go back to the other pod.
Sorry.
And listen to that. No. Thank you.
I just remembered the other film I had watched, but we'll get onto it after.
Did I mention Cherry Falls?
I think you may have done.
Falls about basically it's a 2000 slasher where
about people's virginity.
I think I did. Yeah, look at this.
You did.
This is
that's
awful.
2 you've done. Keep going.
Wow, we'll get there in the end. I watched a film called Close Range, which I definitely
haven't heard about that.
Spoken about. Fine. So Close Range, directed by James Foley, from 1986. I've been really just chasing this cliffhanger vibe. Like I'm obsessed.
I've got a film for you on that, but yeah,
and I'm obsessed with just trying to find that feeling again of like colourful, fun action films. And so I watched At Close Range, and it was nothing like Cliffhanger. So yeah, it was a bit of a good film though. So it's got a stacked cast. So it's got Sean Penn, Christopher Walken, Chris Penn, Mary Masterson, and it's basically about like a little bit of like a local gang vibe. So it's in rural Pennsylvania. And it's about kind of this little gang where they've got like prospects and stuff, and Sean Penn basically goes to meet his dad, who isn't around really, and starts to get into a life of crime with him, and his girlfriend supports this, and so he just slowly starts to unravel that his dad, who is Christopher Walken, turns out to be like quite a dangerous man, and he's getting embroiled in all of this, and he's maybe not quite as ready for that life, and it's quite good. It's a bit of a slow burn, but I enjoyed it, and I'd highly recommend. I watched a film called Cube from 1997, which I'd never seen.
I've never seen Cube.
Low budget, but pretty good. Now
there was Cube and the Sphere within like 2 years of each other.
Was there? Okay.
Yeah, and then like, do you remember when? I sound old, man. Remember when? But like when you used to go to Blockbuster, those were like two really distinctive VHS cases I can remember. Like the Cube and Sphere are two I completely remember. Like Sphere, I'm sure has like got Sam Neill in it as well, maybe. But anyway,
okay.
Sorry, go on.
Well, so this is basically about. It's basically the original Saw movie. It's a group of strangers who just wake up in this like prison, which is like. I don't really want to. It's a cube, right? Obviously, and there's different rooms, and I'm trying not to spoil it. And there's like lasers and stuff like that, and they're trying to get to know each other, but they don't know who they can trust. And
Resident Evil as well. That bit with the lasers. I know someone said it was an inspiration for that, and also a lot of people said it was an inspiration for Alien vs Predator with the way
honestly,
I
think this was one of the first one of those kind of films with like being like kind of trapped in this claustrophobic space with like traps and stuff. Now it's good. It's really good fun. You can tell it's an indie film. There is Morris Dean Wint is in it, who is he seems to be in a completely different film from the rest of the cast, because he is really turn it up to 12 or 13 even, and it's just wild. Like his acting's wild, and looking at his filmography, he's not really done much. Like he's been in a couple of films the last couple of years, so he's obviously tried to, like, maybe he's been on TV and stuff like that, but he was in the Kid Detective, who we highly recommend that film. We love that film.
I did love that film,
with Adam Brody. He's also in a film called Brother, which I spoke about last year, which is great. So Cube's good. Like it's 90 minutes, so it's really tight, and it's just kind of one of those independent trap movies kind of thing where everyone's like kind of maybe double crossed and no one knows who to trust. So I then did go to the cinema to see Baby Girl. So Baby Girl's a 2024 film directed by Helena Rain, who you might know from Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. This is a film starring Nicole Kidman, Harris Dickinson, and Antonio Banderas. Now, this has had really mixed reviews. Like, some people are really hating it. It's about Nicole Kidman plays like a CEO, and she's like really at the top of her career, and she is basically putting her career and family on the line and at risk in order to have this affair with this like young intern. So the young intern's played by Harris Dickinson, and it's quite an uncomfortable film, and I think that's the reason why it's not getting great reviews, because it's about BDSM. Like, she's addicted. We've seen like the first 5 minutes that she has sex with her husband, Antonio Banderas, and then she quickly leaves the room to go and get herself off properly, and watch some porn. So like we see like she's maybe a bit of a sex addict or something like this, or the relationship she's got with her husband isn't quite hitting the spot, for want of a better phrase. So she has this affair, like, and she's addicted to like danger and the danger of this affair. And there's some amazing performances in this. Like, the one thing, Antonio Banderas is in a scene that could be like one of the scenes of the year, upon realizing a certain thing, and he's fantastic. But Nicole Kidman, like, she never. I've noticed this the last few years. I'm just gonna grab this actually. This film Destroyer, which I haven't opened. I've seen it a couple of times, but the last few years she's been doing some work, and she just never ever seems to phone it in. Like, she commits to any kind of role, whether it be to the detriment of her character outside of film, if that makes sense. Like, she doesn't care about humiliating herself, or I say that in inverted commas, like, because she's obviously not. Like, she's just playing these roles, and there's some really uncomfortable scenes in this, and yeah, like, but carry on giving it half a star because it made you uncomfortable. You know, like, it's wild. I thought the end, it had a really satisfying conclusion, and yes, it's just really good. Harris Dickinson as well. He does a real good job of like looking like a bit of a dork. You know him from like Triangle of Sadness and a film called Scrapper from last year, which was brilliant. And he is just brilliant all the time. I don't think I've seen him bad in anything. But I did really want to talk about this one a little bit, hence why I've gone on about it for a while. But I would recommend it. People have said it's like, I hope they don't listen, but I did see someone call it 50 Shades of Beige, and I just found that quite unfair and quite reductive, because the 50 Shades series is not good. This isn't like that. This is a lot different. But yeah, this film Destroyer, from Nicole Kidman, I talk about it all the time. This is probably her career best for me. $3.99 in HMV. But yeah, anyway, if something makes us feel uncomfortable, it doesn't mean it's a bad film. So then I watched A Grand Day Out. So
Classic.
I watched Wallace and Gromit.
So A Grand Day Out was the one that's actually like his student film. So it's like his like finishing college film or
so
uni.
So I watched the first one. Like, I thought it was brilliant, like really good. Then
I used to be really scared of that machine that skis.
Do you know what? So
quite creepy.
Two people have told me different things about this. So Kim, friend of the pod, she said it used to scare her. Vicky said it used to make her cry, but she felt really bad for it when it was like left on the planet.
Oh no, I was glad it was left there. It used to really creep me out.
Yeah, so
I used to cry for Gromit in the second one when he's kicked outside so they can have Feathers McGraw in his bedroom. That used to make me cry.
It always makes me sad that Gromit is like the butt of the like joke. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love Gromit.
Well, he gets his acknowledgement in the latest one, doesn't he? Eventually.
Vengeance Most Foul. So I watched Vengeance Most Foul, which you spoke about last pod. I thought it was fantastic. Like, I was laughing all throughout it all. Like, and it's wonderful. Like, when you do see like well-written comedy, like, we get a lot of like sanitized comedy nowadays, and people will often be like, "Whoa, it doesn't have to be like edgy, blah blah blah." Like, this is a perfect example of something that isn't edgy, but is just written really well and is just knows what it is and is just very funny. Like,
it's just very planned out as well, because they have to, with the nature of the process of what they do, they have to have it really well written, because there's so many things now which are being adapted on the fly or butchered and changed, and like they can't with this. So actually it makes it a lot better, because it's like, yeah, we perfected this to the best it can be, now we're gonna make it, and off we go.
Yeah, like, I love that you can like I know it sounds like I bet you people have said this for years, but you can literally see the fingerprints, like the human fingerprints, all over these models, and not so much on the newer ones, but a little bit here and there. They still keep that in.
There was a complaint when they did Chicken Run because they were adamant they didn't want to show the thumbprints. Then there was backlash because people were like, the showing the thumbprints was part of like the tangibility of it. So then they went back to making it where not all of it's that plasticine, but parts of it are to let people still get that feeling, even though they've really improved the.
I think so.
The build.
I think it's like you can literally see a person's fingerprints all over it, and it's really kind of like remind you of I guess in a world of AI, like the human touch, and that it's like really handcrafted. I know that sounds like really wanky, but it is like, and that's how it feels, and it feels like a human's really like sat there and wrote this and thought about it, and it's obviously like just such a big passion for Nick Park. But so then I watched them A Matter of Loaf and Death. So
I like that one.
It was really good, yeah.
That one's got a bit of Psycho in it, hasn't it?
Yeah, and Aliens.
Yes, the end. Aliens at the end. Yeah,
really
power
good.
loader sequence. Yeah.
I just again, like, just really funny, like, and 30 minutes long. They're just 30 minutes long, and it's just a real good like slice of like joy, really. Bread.
Do you know The Matter of Loaf of Bread though? That one came out in like 2015-16, I think it was. I remember I was like, it obviously wasn't targeted at me.
2008.
Oh, sorry. Okay, but it was that kind of age where I was like, oh, I'm not into it now. Like, it's not for me. And then I watched it again like this Christmas. I was like, that's really good. And like, there's so many film references in all of them.
Oh yeah, there's a few dark moments in that in Loaf and Death. I was like surprisingly dark. I was like that's pretty like crazy. Like anyway, so then still chase. So I watched Footloose as well for the first time on 4K. People were slating the copy of the 4K, but yeah, it was. I thought it was not so bad. Do I have to explain the plot of? I didn't know the plot of Footloose actually, so I'm going to explain it. It's basically
Kevin Bacon dancing.
Kevin Bacon, plays a character called Ren, who moves from Chicago to a small town in the West, and basically music and dancing are illegal in this place. This sounds like such a ridiculous premise, but Kevin Bacon's great. Friend of the show, Beck, did say to me that it's as good as Dirty Dancing, which I found quite wild. She won't be back. But it's not as good as Dirty Dancing, but it is as cheesy as Flashdance. Gives a similar tone to something like The Outsiders, which I really love that film. And it's impossible kind of not to enjoy like the needle drops throughout. I found it a little bit baggy in the middle. Like if you look at the film, like not a great deal goes on. I have been told on rewatch it's much better. And then finally, I'm just going to leave it with this one: The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 from 2009.
Banger.
Well, yes.
Ding 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 ding.
Yeah, like so the remake of the 1970s version, which I hadn't seen. Again, this was me chasing my cliffhanger feeling. So
probably not quite that though, is it?
Not quite that.
2009.
Oh, I'll tell you what though, Tony Scott directed this, right? And this has got like, you know, when something's like there's a gimmick at the time and then something's like trapped in that gimmick and it's aged really badly. This is that, right? So the film's really well crafted, it's really well made, it's great. John Travolta is like really
Ryder.
He's wild, mate. Like completely unhinged, like almost Nick Cage like performance. I was like, I feel like he's done this off the back of like Face Off. Like he's really going his inner like
Hammy.
Nick Cage, yeah. But there's like these external shots of like helicopters and driving and stuff like that, and it's like, does it like 2 FPS? So it's like skipping like across. It's so weird, mate. Like I want you to see it, like, but it's like really like.
It's been a long time since I saw that film.
So it's almost like long exposure shots where like things are like blurred, and then like they've really slowed the frame rate down, so it's like skipping along like helicopters and stuff. I'm like, this is so out of pocket. But anyway, Denzel, John Travolta against each other. What more can you want? It's really good, like really, really good fun. And that's all I've watched, I guess. So yeah.
The other film that I didn't mention was Gladiator 2. But Jamie's kind of said his piece on it, but very quickly from me, I tried to go into it and not do the whole comparing it to the first. I just wanted to just take it for what it is and go with it. And we've always said on this pod, I love Ridley Scott, I love his films, but he's only as good as his scripts, and I can't say particularly like Gladiator 2 is the best one. The first one was a little soap opera and melodramatic anyway, if I'm being brutally honest, but it's carried by just an incredible performance from Russell Crowe. And if I'm being brutally honest, I don't think I got that from Gladiator 2. I just think, for me, Paul Mescal doesn't quite have the same gravitas. I mean, it's such a hard ask, and you know, like, he's had a different upbringing in terms of, like, in the film, like, he's not had the same upbringing as Maximus had. So there's difference.
A bit more of a silver spoon style.
Yeah, and like, does that reflect on it and stuff? But I just, in general, like, it in the first 30 minutes of the film, I don't feel really like we got to know him, aside from the fact it's like he has a wife, and then you pretty much have an idea of what's going to happen there. But in terms of pure visuals, Ridley just never fails to deliver. And like, some of the shots, like especially the opening sequence of it, is the Romans invading a city nearby. And just like, there's CG boats, water, the lot, and it's all like photo real. Like, there's no question for me. I think it's really incredible. Yeah,
most of the CGI is great. Most of it.
It's just some of the arena stuff later, which Jamie mentioned briefly before, with some creature stuff, which isn't quite right. But in terms of the actual overall, how it looks, feels, sounds, and also the score doesn't quite cut it for me. It's just lacking that bit of oomph that the original had. But yeah, and I'm trying not to do the comparison thing, but it's so hard not to when it's literally in that. And also the story's so similar. And then Harry was like, "Oh, it's really similar." I said, "It is," but I said, "You got to remember the Romans were in power for 1,000 years, and basically there was quite a lot of similarity. Like, you know, there were a lot of gladiators, and there were a lot of this and that. So actually, you know, there's logic to it. It's like, if anyone watched any films of ours from like the past 200 years, I suppose a lot of the situations, actually, emotion, relationship-wise, are quite similar, even if, like, you know. Anyway, so there we are. Gladiator 2 in a nutshell.
Yeah, the monkeys, man, just no need. Or
it lacks the tangibility of the first, and that's not because the CG is particularly bad. It's just your brain automatically knows that it's not possible to film, and then you lose that element of it. So there's a sequence with a rhino, and that fares better because it feels more like you could see how they would shoot that. But the sequence with the monkey is just like, your brain knows that it can't be done, so there's just a step of removal. But anyway, there we are.
Yeah, I mean, there's Ridley's been criticised on that film for like just whacking loads of cameras, like 12 cameras in an arena, and just shooting so fast, like, which I think that I don't know, like, he's at his most prolific now. Like, he's churning out more content now than he ever has been.
The thing is, like, he used to do a lot of, like, for his initial films, he was the sole camera operator, and then you can't do that because of unions and whatever. So, like,
yeah,
I understand his whole.
He's also very old now, though, so he probably doesn't want to be doing that. Like,
yeah, but what I was going to say was, in terms of like this whole getting 8 cameras and rolling with it, I think that's just his. It's just his style now. Like, he's been doing that for a while. I think he's been doing it since around Prometheus, if not before.
It's a nightmare to edit.
Well, no, I don't think it is, because you've got multiple coverage. It's easier. If you think about it,
but you've also got, like,
there's more to sift through, for sure. But in terms
of
actual, like, coverage-wise, he's got
I'll listen
the
to
best
you because you're the
coverage.
editor. You're the person that does edits and
I
stuff.
wouldn't want to edit it myself, but I'm just
that's what I mean.
just in general.
It's just like, sounds like a ball ache. But yeah.
Anyway, right, we're 28 minutes in. It's time to talk about one and only War of the Worlds by Steven Spielberg.
$8:30?
We said 8 o'clock.
Hello, Dad.
Get a hug?
Robbie's got a paper, which he's yet to begin.
I just gotta type it up.
You just gotta start writing it first.
Take care of our kids.
You got nothing to worry about. That is so weird. The wind is blowing toward the storm. It's okay. Lightning doesn't strike twice.
Where's the thunder?
Well, let me just correct you. It's not the one and only.
Yeah, that's true, actually. There's a 1950-something version. But there we are.
Yeah. Okay, cool. This is the first time I'd watched this. 4K, first time, Friday night. I for some reason, I assumed it was rubbish. So I had it. Get this, right? I don't know what happened in 2000. Well, I do know what happened in 2005. I just finished my GCSE. getting involved with girls at that time, and I was still watching loads of films, but for some reason, I think maybe someone at the time, word of mouth, told me that War of the Worlds was not a good film, and that's what I carried through until the ripe old age of 35. I'm now 36, but yeah, crazy.
I think a lot of that is to do with the ending of the film, and there's two elements to this. I think the most interesting parts that work for this film are also some of the downfall of it, and we'll get into it. Okay. So when so David Koepp wrote this film for Steven Spielberg, and basically he wrote a list of cliches from like science fiction films he wanted to avoid.
Yes,
so
I've seen this. I'm glad you mentioned this.
So he did like, I don't want a news crew going somewhere and then being vaporized immediately, and then so that goes back all the way to the original Godzilla, by the way. Like they're reporting on the tower. Then you've got the
landmarks.
Don't want to see landmarks getting blown up. Don't want to see New York being blown up.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because they got in trouble at the time for people saying it was trying to harken back to too much 9/11 imagery, which is something people weren't happy about on release, which is interesting.
Well, do you know why? That's interesting actually, because I watched. So the 4K disc is loaded with special features. So I was just watching that before I come on the pod. So Spielberg mentions in this behind the scenes footage that he won't shut up about 9/11 during it. So he was saying that he's always been fascinated with what happens if this planet gets invaded, and this was like post 9/11 fears and fears of the Soviet Union and nuclear war. Obviously we know that the film's about colonialism, really, but he references 9/11 quite a few times in the fears around that, because it was post 9/11. So that's interesting that other people had that
reaction to it,
yeah,
and even all the way through to Man of Steel with like that opening sequence and the end sequence, which is the start of Batman v Superman. And I understand why it's a sensitive subject, like for very, very obvious reasons.
It's quite, I find 9/11 quite as a person that lives in the UK, I find 9/11 pretty odd, really, because obviously it's a horrendous thing that happened, like really bad. It's affected the whole entire world. Like we go through customs in a completely different way now because of that. But I also see a lot of Americans like make jokes about it all the time, like, and it's not really off the table in terms of jokes. Like, when there are certain things like you would never make jokes about, like certain like tragedies and stuff like that. But then 9/11 is something that I quite often hear jokes being made about, or like people make light of it quite often. I'm not like naming names, but like it's something that I just hear. Like it doesn't. People don't treat it the same way they treat other tragedies, really, and I don't know why that is. Maybe if we've got an American listener, maybe you live over there. I would love to know, genuinely.
I wonder if that's like a coping mechanism thing as well, though. I mean, I've no idea, but I wonder if that's like a who knows. Anyway, the other thing David Koepp talked about was they didn't want, I think I just mentioned landmarks going down, but they didn't want the shot of the president pushing around a table saying, I want the fleet to go here, here, and here. Yeah. So the best part of this film for me is the fact that it's a small scale. You're following a family get from point A to point B. Now, the best part of that is it basically starts in a small town, or this was Philadelphia, but then you're kind of like in a smaller town and then going through, and then that's great. But then also when the film ends, it's very hard to get the geography of like what's going on around. But part of the film is giving you the experience of living through that living hell and not knowing what's going on. So that's kind of the appeal, because everyone's like, oh, it hasn't gone to Europe, or it hasn't done this, hasn't done that, and you don't know, because you know as much as the main character knows throughout the film. There's no cutaway to the president or whatever to kind of explain the overarching picture. You're being drip fed information from how they know it throughout the film. So just to mention, this film very simply is about Tom Cruise plays Ray Ferrier, who is a kind of he's divorced dad, and we get the impression that he's pretty unlikable. He works at the docks, so he seems handy enough, but like his kids are coming to stay for the weekend and he doesn't seem best pleased about it. His kid's played by Justin Chapman, who plays Robbie, and then famously Dakota Fanning plays his daughter Rachel Ferrier. Neither of them particularly respect him, and like very early on, like you can see the beef he has with his son because he's not around. And then Rachel, his daughter, just basically completely ignores him as a dad, and then like her brother Robbie's doing all the parenting while he's just there along for the ride. However, like people said at the time, oh, Tom Cruise is miscast in this film. I think it's great he gets to play an asshole, And like around this time is not too dissimilar when he did Collateral, when he played a bad guy, which I actually quite enjoy him. It was Collateral,
was
right?
Just after this, I think.
Yeah, and I really like him playing unlikable people, because so often he is the suave hero, or the he is Ethan Hunt, and actually him like trying to be this kind of like cocksure, as someone said, it's like he peaked in high school kind of guy. He was the jock who did well and then dicked about for a few years, but actually like his life's a bit sad, like his house is not great and he's obviously not a great father. But then the film is kind of about him building that relationship with his kids and proving like his paternal instincts kick in, and basically watching that happen over the film. Just to mention, sorry, I've said David Koepp wrote the film. Obviously it's based on the original novel by H.G. Wells. So the H.G. Wells novel was based in, like, I think it's 18 or 1900s, I believe. And then...
late 1800s. Sorry, really important to know, the Collateral was just before War of the Worlds. Sorry, I do apologise.
No, it's okay.
And so was Minority Report, which we will talk about as well.
Yeah, so just in terms of Tom Cruise and playing those different roles, I actually really enjoy it, the fact he plays a bit of an arse. But basically the film starts with... his son nicks his car and he goes to find his son, and on the way his son's come back and there's this weird electrical storm that's been happening and lightning's striking in the same place multiple times. So he says that's not supposed to happen, and then he finds out like all the cars' batteries are fried, like none of the cars are starting in the street. And then we get this great build-up of Shakespearean, of Spielbergian, like, there's something underground, and like people are equally as curious, even though they should run away, they're just curious to know what it is. And then you see a ginormous tripod come out from underneath the ground. And what I love about this era of filmmaking, and this kind of seemed to die off after kind of around Transformers later, but Michael Bay is brilliant at it as well, is when you have effects happening in camera aided by CG. So rather than it being a full CG this, full CG that, it's like, oh, that bridge, there's a miniature version, these cars are miniature, and then we'll composite that in with some CG and we'll put it into this background. So rather than being solely reliant on it being a fully fake image, it was a point where you still got tangible practical elements, whether it was like real locations or like models being captured, all integrated digitally through the computer, and then adding CG on top of them, but having a basis in reality. So then the effects age a hell of a lot better than films that came afterwards but were fully CG and obviously didn't have the budget to pull it off, or just didn't quite do it. It's just interesting. I mean, yeah, that was before this and had other issues, but yeah. But talk to me about it. Sorry, that's just giving a little bit of a background of how we get into the plot, and then essentially he needs to get his family to Boston, and it's following that happen, and it's just hell. Like I always forget, because I haven't watched this in a long time, how stressful this film is. Like, it's not a fun film to watch. It's got that kind of Alien 3 tone to it, where like it's all quite oppressive and somber, and actually it's not a fun film. But it's also like one of Spielberg's most visually interesting films for me.
It's quite dark for Spielberg, but maybe doesn't go dark enough in one area. So it's really funny because I've got this up on Letterboxd just to find out I use it just to reference the cast sometimes and stuff, but the top review on there is from Patrick Willems, and it says, back in my day we had proper summer blockbusters that were determined to absolutely traumatize children. I'm like, yeah, do you know what?
Yeah, literally that. Yeah,
because this is a 12.
Excuse me.
But it is very dark, like, and we see, like, I mean, we've got like the ash of like dead people on living people's faces and that kind of thing. I mean, I like this because it's like John said, this is not it's not an external story, is it? It's
not like Independence Day, but basically the opposite of that.
Yeah, you're not observing the world as a whole. You're observing one man, and it's from his point of view, and I think that's what they really grasped from the novel. So I love that when they were talking about that, they're talking about like we're not having big maps plotting things like that. That was a great kind of that really adds a little bit of what Spielberg does really well, which adds the human part of this alien story, I guess. Tom Cruise's character being like really blue collar also works well because he's your everyman. You know that there'll be a lot of people out there that can relate to him. He's a dock worker, and you kind of see at the beginning because obviously he's divorced from his wife Marianne, and she's got a new boyfriend who's very
together.
They arrive in a big car. He's very well to do, and it's like you kind of you imagine that is the correct way of things, you know, like because she looks like she should be with a man like that, and Tom Cruise is a little bit like he's got this small house and not a good relationship with his kids, and doesn't really want to see them, and so that kind of we see throughout the film then him slowly building a bond with his children and changing as a person and becoming the hero per se, if that makes sense. That's what I do like about it. That I thought it was just this silly blockbuster with loads of special effects, and it's not silly at all. It is a big blockbuster with loads of special effects with a human story at the heart of it. And there's some really there's some scenes in this that even I was like, oh my god! Like John referenced it as well. Like, and it was probably, I said, oh, that's my favorite scene of the film. And it's when they are kind of making their way across the landscape and this journey. We're going on a journey. We don't know what's ahead of us, and they are in the car, and the car. There's a lot of Spielberg does really well at showing what humans would really do in a film that's doesn't feel very realistic because it's aliens coming out of the ground, to like actually showing how the human beings of Earth would react in this situation. I think's great.
So basically, for context, Tom Cruise somehow works out one of the things to change on the car for it to start, and they're like one of the only people with a vehicle. But there's obviously a scene then when they enter a small town or like near a motel, and people are like desperate to get in the car, to the point where someone literally like smashes the windscreen with their bare hands, and their hands like spliced open with blood, and they're like ripping the windscreen off because they're that desperate to get away somewhere.
Pretty scary with the kids. Like it's quite.
His daughter's in the car, and like he can't get his daughter out of the car when someone like holds him up at gunpoint to get out of the car. Like, it is horrible. And yeah, let me just read this comment I saw on YouTube, and I should have copied and pasted also their name, and I didn't. But it said, "This is really one of the creepiest alien invasion films I have ever seen. Not because of the machines and what they do, but because of the little things. Ray's covered in the ashes of his neighbours, the river of bodies, which we'll get on to, the train that goes through, which is burning, and the scene where the cloths are raining down from the sky, right?" So, like, I think he meant clothes, but anyway.
Good job you didn't mention him if you were going to slate his grammar.
Yeah, and it says, there's just a foreboding atmosphere throughout the movie, and it really shows, and it's true. So there is a sequence where it's daytime, and like we've had the first initial tripod attack, which is visually still incredible. Yeah. And it's on in this small town in a small part of Philly, like where what's his character name before I keep calling him Tom Cruise, where Ray lives, right? So then they manage to escape in a vehicle, and then after that, his daughter says, "Oh, I need a wee." Basically, I need to go, and he's like, "Yeah, but you have to stay within eye line." And she goes just out of eye line, and like she's walking towards a river, and you see this shot of like lovely sunshine sparkling on the water, and you're like, "Oh, nature, things aren't that bad." And like in my memory, 28 Days Later does stuff like this, but anyway, and walks over to the water, and then you can see something coming down. You're like, "What's that?" And it's feet. And then you see a body, you see one body, and you're like, "Oh, that's grim." But then you see red blood, and then it's literally like hundreds of people like coming down, and it's like you see Dakota Fanning, who's brilliant in this, by the way, her face reacting to like all the bodies, and it's like traumatizing. And then like Ray runs up behind her and grabs her, and he's like, "I told you not to go out of eye line and to only look where I say." And it's just like it's harrowing, but it's just really well executed by Spielberg, taking those grimly realistic scenarios and playing them out really. And
yeah, it's rare for him to do something like that. I think he's not really one for. You'd think he would focus on the kind of the
spectacle side of it rather than.
Dakota, I'm glad you mentioned Dakota Fanning because I've always been such a big fan of her. Like so the reason Spielberg chose her, he said that the only person to play, I can't remember the little girl's name, Rachel, to play Rachel was Dakota Fanning. He said she was the best child actor around at that time. And I remember seeing her around that time, well, a few years later in a film called Push, which everyone hates.
I remember Push with
But I really
Chris
like-
Evans.
Yeah, I really like it. It was by Paul McGuigan. But yeah, I love Push, and it's probably worth it. Like I would say, I would recommend it. It's decent for kind of a lower budget kind of superhero kind of film. I bet you a lot of people wouldn't have even heard of it. But she's in that, and she's fantastic in that. And I think she took quite a long break from acting, really, because she hadn't really done a great deal kind of in the 2010s. But then lately she's been back with she's
been
started acting
consistent.
again. So she was in Watchers, the Shyamalan, but not M. Night Shyamalan. I think his daughter. Yeah, his daughter's film. She was in Watchers. Then she was in Equalizer 3, and also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So she has been doing bits and pieces, which is great to see. Like, I love her. Like, I think she's one of the greatest parts of this film. One who isn't one of the greatest parts of this film is Robbie, who is actually like one of the most annoying. He's fine, actually. The acting's fine. So I'm not saying anything about.
I think he's just a
Justin Chatwin.
teenage boy in it though. Like he's supposed to be
Such a twat. Like he was like
Yeah.
such a dick. Like, and I was just like, why? So when I was talking about earlier on, like, yeah, this is a dark film, but I reckon Spielberg could have gone darker. There's obviously we go on this journey with the characters, and Tom Cruise is learning to become kind of like actually what it means to be a father, and that unconditional, like, looking after your children no matter what, like, and taking a bullet for them kind of thing, which we don't really get from the beginning, because we kind of get the idea that he works and he's not really asked about anything really, he's not really been there for his ex-wife either. That's why they've kind of split up. But then he's learning as the film goes on. But yeah, Robbie does this thing where he just keeps trying to run away, and it's just really annoying. I'm just like, I just love a tripod just to smash him, like. And he runs into the front line. He's like, Dad, I've got to do it. I found that bit a little bit odd, to be honest. I'm assuming it's in the book, but he's like, oh, Dad, I've got to go. And
the call to war. No, I just kind of thought when you were
a kid, what are you talking about? You'd be shitting yourself.
Yeah, but I don't know though. I think people react in different ways, and no one can say they can how they react in that scenario anyway, because it's just completely nuts. Oh yeah, go on, tell me.
I'd just run. I'd run away. Of course I would.
But
I'm gonna fight aliens.
But the thing is though, like, as a teenager, you make bad decisions, and the film was doing a good job of showcasing the bad decision. Yeah. There's some more sequences we've got to talk about before we even get near that though. So we've got we've talked about the car and like that whole scenario.
So sorry.
Go on.
With that scene, what I love about it is that the film starts off in daytime, and it's still scary in daytime, and then when it gets to night, they choose to do that scene at night, and that is like super. It's a really horrible scene in the car, because it's the most realistic of how human beings would act, and they didn't care that there was kids in the car, and they smash the car up, or try and get in the car, and they do take the car in the end, and Ray's got to pull a gun out to get his kids out of the car, and then someone else steals the gun off. He steals the car off the man that's stolen it and kills him. And so that's kind of like the mob mentality is really quite terrifying. They just go and sit in this diner, and that's kind of the first moment of respite we get since we've been in the house, really.
Yeah, because the first hour you've kind of got the initial tripod coming out in Philly, then you've got there's a sequence where it looks like a Warner where the camera's going in and out of the car, which is quite well put together, and then after that you've got they go to the mum's house, but they're away for the weekend, and when they get to the mum's house, they wake up they sleep in the basement, because there's like it looks like fireworks outside, but it's obviously just the aliens doing stuff. And when they go back outside the next day, there's a sequence where Tom's like, Ray's like, I'm just gonna go check it out, and then you get this pulled back reveal of like the light looks different in the house now, but it's because there is no house. Like half the house is torn off, and there's literally a Boeing 747 like outside. Jamie's going to tell you now about how that came to be. No, you can do it. Go on.
Oh, no, I don't know. I got excited when you mentioned the Boeing 747. They actually used some of the budget to buy a Boeing 747 and cut it up and put it out on the street. And I just thought that was fantastic. Like again, when John mentioned earlier on, like the mixture. This is when CGI works the best, when you're mixing it with actual practical, like tangible effects. And yeah,
By the
to
way,
see them...
people still do that now. I shouldn't say that.
Of course they do.
At this point, they kind of had to,
Yeah.
and the limitation bred more creativity and actually got better results. And then it kind of got away from that because it can be changed more. If it's all CG, you're not locked into an idea. Whilst with this style, you are kind of semi-locked in to like what you do in the final output. But what I would say is Nolan is very good at... He always says he doesn't use any CG. Of course he uses CG, but he's very good at getting big practical things and then marrying it up with CG on top of. And then, yeah, you get the best results from it. So, another sequence that I really like, I always get the orders kind of confused, but they're heading towards the ferry, I think, and there's a sequence where the train things are coming down, and then Ray keeps being like, don't worry, because when we get to this town, nothing bad's happened there, is what I've heard. Yeah. And then this train just comes through and it goes, and it's like a ghost train because it's going full tilt, but it's just like fireball through like every single carriage. So like it's like, what happened there? Well, you know what happened, it's been shot by the laser and they've all died, but it's just like a really horrifying, harrowing image. And then the other part, which I remember giving me anxiety at the time, is the ferry sequence. So Ray and the kids are trying to get onto a ferry, and like you're desperately willing them to get onto this ferry. If you've ever been in a large crowd leaving a football stadium or something, you want to get onto a train, you know exactly how they feel at this point. And then like they manage to get on, but then as they get on, it becomes clear that it's not, the getting on the ferry is actually a problem, because then there's a tripod in the water, and as the tripod comes out, it makes like a swell, and then the ferry's getting pulled into it. There's people literally stuck in their cars in the ferry drowning. It is horrific. And
that's the film.
This is why it's like not a fun film to rewatch. And then like Robbie's trying to save people, as in Ray's son Robbie, and then it's incredibly well executed, like models, real people shot against blue screen, like when the tripods are lifting them up and out of the water. It's just, yeah. And the other thing is, I watched this it was a 4K stream, to be fair, but the night photography is fantastic. The daytime stuff I'm not massively keen on, I'll be honest, and I have, it's not just me saying this, I watched the Ollie Harper retrospective about War of the Worlds. He's always a brilliant channel for that kind of stuff. And he said it is strange how like the opening scenes there's like a really like weird halation, which is like a glow around the characters in daytime, and like it's like really overly bright in the backgrounds. I don't really know what the point of that was, but when you get some sequences with the tripods, it works. Maybe again it's a visual thing to like mix the CG and whatever. Maybe.
What it was, yeah.
But then when you get to the sequence with the nighttime, it all looks so pin sharp, and like it's similar to Minority Report. It looks like it's been through the process.
My Minority Report.
Yeah, it's got that kind of like they've done the process where you've sapped the colours back out of the image, the bleach bypass process. I always say that wrong.
No wonder. That's Peter Piper picked the peck of pickled peppers, you know.
Exactly
the bleach bypass process.
Bleach bypass process.
And what is that?
Basically, it's effectively removing certain colours from the film stock, as in, so like they become more washed out to feel more realistic. Okay. Which will lead on to our chat. I'm going to save it for when we talk about Contact. I think we do that then. Yeah. But the visual style of it is actually very, very similar to Minority Report. But Minority Report, I feel like that weird halation and kind of blurry, overly bright thing works because it's depicting the future and it all looks a bit weird anyway. Like, but in this, it is a bit distracting, the daytime sequences. But the thing that people complain about at the time, and I think is a fair thing, is once Robbie decides to run off and join the army, and there's this massive like explosion going on up the hill, Ray manages to get Rachel to a house, and there's this guy called Harlan Ogilvy, played by Tim Robbins. Ogilvy, that sounds better. And Tim Robbins says, "Come and live in my basement. It's fine." And then initially you're like, "Oh, this guy's had a few issues," but considering the fact that the world's gone to pot, I completely understand why. Then it becomes he thinks they should lead a resistance with with Ray's daughter, and like, you know, we'll hit them when they don't know we're coming, and it's kind of, he's playing the conspiracy theorist kind of, like, you know,
He's a mixture of three characters.
Go on.
From the book, he is. So the curate who gets the artilleryman, the curate, and the narrator. So I believe like they're a combination of like three different characters.
Okay.
But his like behavior and like dialogue is something to do with like I think it's the narrator. That's basically the main character he's based off. Tim Robbins does a good job of playing a crazy guy. Or a guy that's like just a bit odd. Like he does a really similar performance in Jacob's Ladder, which I would recommend. It's a wild film. But yeah, like, so people really criticise this scene, John.
Because
why is that?
I would say because basically the film is pretty much non-stop. I say action, it's disaster action, but it's pretty non-stop for probably the first hour.
Yeah.
And I feel like we get in this basement at around about an hour and 20, and it feels like it grinds to a halt because you've got all this large-scale stuff, and then you're stuck in a basement with Tim Robbins. And as someone said, like, the Tim Robbins section, if it was a standalone film, is like a really good kind of Hitchcockian one location.
Yeah.
There's this guy going slowly nuts in the corner, and you know it's going to have to be dealt with at some point, but when do you do it? And like, it's got the, you know, Spielberg's always great at his blocking, so you know, and we've talked about this before with Kubrick, is here's this basement, I know that's where the staircase is, that's where the window is, and there's another part of the basement where there's a cupboard, and in the cupboard you're safe, right? So then inevitably the aliens for some reason decide to come out of their tripods, which is another thing people don't like about this film, and I completely agree with it, which is they send like a probe down to look around, and then Tim Robbins decides he wants to attack them, and then Dakota Fanning's in danger, and all of the above. So basically Ray comes to the decision, which is he needs to kill Harlan to ensure his family's survival, and there's a really dark scene which is very, it reminded me of Hitchcock in Torn Curtain, where someone gets killed in an oven.
I haven't actually seen Torn Curtain, but because you told me it's rubbish.
But that's the one really, really grim, dark sequence out of nowhere that everyone's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And that's a bit like this in this film. It's a bit like, oh my God, Tom Cruise is going to go and beat this guy up and just drown him in the water, which he does. But anyway, so people felt at the time this ground the film to a halt. And I think it kind of does, but also you need the respite. You need to take stock of what's going on.
Isn't it? Like,
if it was in the midway point and not towards the end, because basically what happens is, by the time they get out of the cellar, they, like, Dakota Fanning gets captured, and then, like, Ray saves her, and then realistically, it's kind of like, oh, we walked back to town, and when we walked back to the town, the cold virus had hit the aliens, and the end. There's no big battle, no spectacle, and I think people, as an audience, would like, even if they'd done, like, a montage of, like, news, which I know would have gone against what they said, but at that point there could have been a reasoning to, like, why at the end everyone knew what was going on or something. It would have been, I think audiences would have preferred it, but
I think that
I respect it for not doing that at the same time, for the fact it shows this horrific journey from one family's perspective throughout, and like and how that makes you feel, because it is a film of dread, isn't it? Like, I'm not amping this up. It's not particularly bloody. There is blood in it, and it's uncomfortable, but it's just the whole thing, you feel off. It's one of those films you watch it, and then you're going to have a nightmare, or at least feel off afterwards, because it's just unsettling. And also because, and I don't fully want to go on this tangent, but like the scene with the car and like people reacting madly, like, did anyone ever think when a pandemic hit that we'd all be going mad over toilet roll and like the behaviour you saw in like supermarkets and panic? So actually it's probably more prevalent now.
Honestly, the way people were acting. No, you are right. Like, and I think it's okay to go off on the tangent, because it is a worldwide kind of like pandemic. And do you know what's really funny? Like, I say to you all the time, I think, like, I'm sick of hearing about it. Like, it's I was thinking the other day, well, not the other day, like a few months ago, like when will people stop referencing COVID? Like,
well, never, because it's one of those. It's like pre-war, post-war, and like this is our version of that. Like before lockdown, after lockdown, and also like the effects on workforce, business, and everything else. We won't go on that rant today, but like it still affects everything today, and it will affect things for like 10 years. And like,
Yeah,
I went to
sure.
a talk where someone said we're still reeling in the effects of
War
financial
II.
crisis from 2000. No, from financial crisis from 2008. We're still reeling from the effects of.
Well, yeah,
People don't want to think about that in 2024, but do you know what I mean?
So off World War II.
Well, there you go. So
we had like so. But yeah, no, you are right. Like with like in that regard, like that is human beings are like so selfish in those times. It's like if people were saying that like there was no shortage of toilet roll and there was no shortage of fuel if people just took what they needed, but people never do.
But it's always like that. But there was a petrol crisis not long after COVID, and it was because for some reason there was like 2 or 3 they missed delivery slots, and there was no fuel crisis, but there was a fuel crisis created by it being reported on, and then like
everyone fills their tank. It's annoying.
People went in with their carrier bags. Do you remember that? People were like taking carrier bags to fill it with fuel. Like people were nuts. Anyway,
Mate,
but my point is,
I would have tried. It'd been hard for me not to set that on fire.
Oh god!
But yeah, a couple of questions about.
Let's answer a couple of questions about it.
Because then I do want to touch on Spielberg's relationship with Cruise. But in fact, let's do that now. So obviously,
go for it.
The reason why Spielberg did this film actually was because he was persuaded by Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise approached him with the idea of doing War of the Worlds. They'd worked on Minority Report together.
Have you seen Minority Report?
Oh yeah.
Oh good. I was going to say because I think
rewatch that, to be honest.
Minority Report I think is one of the best Cruise movies and also one of the best Spielberg movies.
One of the best
like
sci-fi films
love it
ever made.
Anyway, go on.
So they had a really good relationship. Really had a great relationship, and then during this filming of this, their relationship did break down towards the end. So one of the reasons was Tom Cruise made a very, very odd appearance on Oprah Winfrey where if you go and watch it, just type in Tom Cruise Oprah Winfrey on YouTube. It's so weird, and he's just coming out and he's not really saying anything. He's on all fours and he's like grabbing Oprah's hands
He's punching the floor. He does this. He goes, like he does that over and over and over. Like
and he's like just laughing like for just ages. It's so odd. And so and Oprah she
looks a bit freaked out too.
Yeah, she's done a really good job of like kind of going along with his weird.
I've never seen you like this.
Yeah. But so and obviously Spielberg thought that hurt the production of the film or like
the promotion
sorry, of the film. But then as well as that, there has been there was rumors of Tom Cruise trying to convert Steven Spielberg to Scientology during
allegedly.
the filming. Yeah, allegedly during the filming process, and so that kind of caused a breakdown of their relationship. I think they were seen hugging a couple of years ago, though. So I think they might be best. Well, they might be best.
I mean, look, Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise. Leave him be. He's fine. He's not hurting anyone at the moment. So just
not that you know of. Allegedly. Anyway, but yeah. So so there's a few little production bits there. The film had a budget. We always talk about the budget of 130 million, which is quite a lot actually back then.
But it came in under budget, didn't it? By the time they finished.
I don't know about if it came in under budget, but I do know that
it did.
Made 603 million, which is pretty good going. But yeah,
but not the hit they thought it would be.
Not the hit they thought it would be. 2005. I wonder why that would be, because War of the Worlds is obviously there's been so much around that.
Wasn't it also the same year as like Revenge of the Sith and stuff though? What year was it? Was it 06 or 05? It's 05. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so 2005 box office.
Yeah, go on. Let's sorry. Quick Google, but it's worth
domestic box office for 2000. So yeah, Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, episode 3. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Oh, tough.
I was going to say, mate, 2 big movies. Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
What else?
Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Apparently, well, it says it grossed more than that. That's a domestic box. Hold on, let's have a look at the worldwide.
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when the first one came out, was a massive deal, though, wasn't it? Because they thought it'd be the new Harry Potter series. Then it wasn't.
So that was the third. So the third highest grossing was. So the highest grossing actually was Goblet of Fire. Second was Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Of course it was.
Third was Chronicles of Narnia. Fourth was War of the Worlds. And then, obviously...
It's a big year, though, to be fair.
King Kong as well.
Oh, my God.
I went to see King... Put it this way, I remember going to see King Kong at the cinema, but I definitely did not go and see that poo thing. What's it called?
Narnia.
I didn't go and see Narnia. And I didn't go and see War of the Worlds either.
So I saw...
Batman Begins. Batman Begins. What a pretty good year, actually.
Mate, yeah. 2005 is decent. Look, I've got a whole thing about life
Kingdom
peaking
of
around
Heaven.
2005, 2006. So
Kingdom of Heaven.
all the music I like ended around that time, etc. But that's fine. That's just getting old. Anyway, have we got any more questions specifically for War of the Worlds?
We've got questions about aliens and UFOs.
I'd keep that for next film.
So movie scenes and shit writes in, just like you can. And he says, name a child character more annoying than Rachel. I'll wait.
No, I'm not having it. Great.
I've got to say, I also disagree with because I actually don't mind Rachel, but I tell you who is the most annoying annoying character, not girl character, but just child character in general. So there's a film called The Visit from 2015, which I've referenced on this podcast lots of times.
You have.
Now, Tyler from The Visit is the most annoying. This is the M. Night Shyamalan film, right? I think so. Anyway, there's two kids in that film. The little boy is obsessed with rapping, and he does these like stupid little raps. And at the end, he's like rapping all the way through it, like recording himself and stuff. And at the end, like he does this rap as the credits roll. I actually hate him. I hate him. But Rachel, for me, in this was all right. I found that she was quite
She's
good.
Realistic.
Yeah,
I
liked it because like a lot of the time she was like her critical thinking was better than her dad's. Like, and she was a decent thinker and got him to think in different ways. Robbie is the one that I don't like. So yeah, the most annoying child I would say definitely would be Tyler from The Visit. So go and watch that and prepare to be raged up. So another question, Patch writes in and says, War of the Worlds is a classic sci-fi tale from the time of classic literature.
Yeah.
What other novels from that era would work with modern adaptation, and who are you casting? So go on.
I think you. Sorry, I was just going to say we're kind of in an era where they are all being done. I mean, like I say, all. That's Foundation was kind of the one that I always wanted to see adapted, which is an Asimov book series, which I'd read. It's proper old school sci-fi. I think it's like maybe 30s to 50s or something. I can't remember. But that's now a TV show, which I'll be honest, I haven't watched on Apple TV. But like there are a lot of like.
I'll be honest, I haven't watched.
No, sorry, but there is a lot of like classic literature which is adapted, because I think Jamie and I have talked about this before. Like studios like existing IP, because if there's an existing awareness of that item, whatever it is, so Marvel's the best example for this, but like if there's an existing book that this can be based on, it will already have an audience of people who are interested. And like classic sci-fi is kind of like those books, some of them are more notorious than others, like George Orwell's 1984, like lots of people know, but we haven't actually had a film adaptation for a very long time. Like there's the Virgin one, which was done with Branson produced, and I've forgotten who's in it. John Hurt, isn't it?
I don't know. I've not seen it.
But anyway, so there's that, you know, there's a lot of classic science fiction literature, but I would say now in the era of streaming, there is usually a TV show or film about most of them. But sorry, Joe, what were you going to say?
No. I was going to name a few books that I'd probably like to be adapted, but they've already been adapted before. So
Readapted.
I've actually been reading. I do read quite a bit. Me and John both read quite a bit. I've got a big stack of Star Trek books for you, mate.
I can't wait. Thanks.
I've literally got like 9.
Only TOS though, but yeah.
Well, sorry about that. But so I've been reading some classic literature that I'd never read before. So I had read, oh God, why can't I remember it now? Bloody hell! The Pigs.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it's not called The Pigs, John. I'm asking you what it is. It's
I don't know. I'm waiting for you.
Animal Farm. So Animal Farm, obviously.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
That would be pretty good to have like a recent adaptation. The audiobook, I'd really highly recommend someone listen to the audiobook. So anyone knows what Animal Farm is. Obviously, it's kind of an allegory of, I guess, what we have hierarchy in business and like capitalism and that kind of thing. But it's a book that is written in, I think, the early 1900s, and still rings true today. Like, so it's crazy. But the guy that does the voices for these animals, the pig voice he does, and it sounds a lot like Donald Trump, which is very interesting.
I've got 3 Asimov books, and it's really annoying me in the name of them, so I'm going to go grab it. So I'm going to be doing some bad podcasting.
You can't even listen to me, but
I can't.
I'll talk into a voice.
Talk loudly.
So the other book I've been reading at the moment is The Time Machine. Now, I believe we have an adaptation of that, a film adaptation, but it's just not very good. So I think that would be another really good adaptation. And then when I was just looking here, some like Wind in the Willows, I think, imagine a modern adaptation of that, like a live action modern adaptation, something along the lines of, like, I don't know, the Wizard of Oz kind of style, where you would have, I don't know, you've got the big frog and stuff. So I would like to see, something like that. That would be great. I'm not really great on classic literature, so there's a lot that I couldn't really tell you what it's even about. Dorian Gray, it's been years since we've had one of those. So it's John's got his books there.
Sorry, yeah, I'm really annoyed. There's another one I can't quite get to. So Foundation was the one I talked about earlier, and this is Prelude to Foundation. So I'm guessing they'll cover that in the series, because this one was a prequel to Foundation. So I don't know whether they've started here and done the other one.
Yeah.
But I do like old Asimov books, and they're actually not that difficult to read in terms of the writing style is actually surprisingly okay, considering how old they are.
Yeah, there's some that are like difficult to read because do you know, H.G. Wells is when I was reading The Time Machine.
Yeah.
You really realise how you have to have a good EQ, and a good vocabulary for reading his books back then, because they were quite complicated then compared to what a lot of writers write now. No disrespect to anyone, like, you would just argue that people argue that the best writing is the writing that the most people can understand, kind of thing. But then we have things like The Sun with the reading age of, like, I don't know, 6 or whatever it is. But there was another one that I would like to see. And that would be Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. So that'd be pretty cool. In terms of people playing them, I don't really know. I'd have to really sit down and go through it and decide. But it's hard for me to think about who would play them when I've not read a lot of the books and I only know the kind of stories behind them. So yeah. But it's a really cool question.
Sorry, this was the last one I did. So this was Robots of Dawn. I've actually had to read a refresher because it was 5 years ago since I actually read it, maybe 4. Yeah. And so basically, this is in the iRobot series. So like iRobot's the first one.
Yeah. And
there's a detective in it. So this one's a whodunit. But I found this one really interesting because I read it just after COVID. Speaking of when you get annoyed to talk about it, but it's interesting because. It says Detective Elijah Bailey of Earth is training with his son and others to overcome their socially ingrained agoraphobia when he is told that the space world of Aurora has requested him to investigate a crime. So basically, I remember the point was there's lots of characters in this who never leave their property because they have robots to go outside for them, so they never leave the house because there's no need for them to do it. Okay. And it was reading that just after lockdown, I was very like, oh my god, like we're literally doing this, and it's like she'll only speak to people through Teams. But not Teams. But you've got to remember, this is like, what, originally published 1983. Okay, not as far back as I thought. But anyway, it's very forward-thinking in terms of, like, how the world would be and stuff. And, like, it's just really interesting. I really enjoy it. Anyway, so there we are. Yes.
Jonah Q writes in for the first time, thank you, and says, do you think the ending of War of the Worlds is good? So yeah, it's a pretty good question to end on.
Look, I kind of touched upon this like early on in the pod, which is it is the ending of the book, which is that it is what it is. But this is where you're hampered by the not having the world view. So Tom Cruise Ray knows nothing about how this ends. It's like one day it's finished and they're left to deal with the world around them, which is like a burning carcass of a world by this point. It's probably something like a third of the population's gone, if not more.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
I found the end quite good, because it was appropriate. Yeah, but it was appropriate for the whole story that we've been seeing, because what we've been seeing is that through the eyes of one man, and his family, and so. I
agree, but I think I understand why people.
The boy should have died.
Yes, it was very Spielbergian to go back to the house and then run and find his son was there alive. I was a bit like, look, if you joined the army in that scenario, at that point in the film, there was no winning against the tripod, so I'm not sure what happened there.
The nice thing is that his ex-wife's parents were at the house, and they were actually the main characters of the
original
1950s adaptation, so that was pretty nice. So yeah, I mean overall it's a film full of good ideas, looks good, sounds good. What I did love was that John Williams wrote the majority of the score without having even seen the film, so he'd only seen a couple of reels of the film, And yeah, another great thing was that I wanted to touch upon the fact that the robots come out of the ground instead of come from outer space, which is pretty cool, which suggested they've been in the ground for millions of years. So I love those little just subversion
Tweaks.
of the genre. Yeah,
I would say with John Williams, it's not a very John Williams score in terms of it's very like moody.
Yeah,
it's very it's not an easy listen back, but like
blind.
it shouldn't be.
He was flying by the seat of his pants.
No, but I mean, it's not got heroic themes or melodies or whatever, because it's not that kind of film, and it's not Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is obviously the last kind of film to go on the Contact vibe. But
I was just going to say, 60 of those the jacket that Tom Cruise wears, 60 of those were made throughout the filming process, which is I found pretty cool. The costume designer, was a little interview I was watching on, and she was saying that when he eventually takes his jacket off and he just has his t-shirt on, she's like, that's more of the body coming through, the emergence of a hero. And I was like, okay.
I mean, I understand those things, but anyway, when you hear it, you're like, okay, all right then.
I was like, shut up, he just took his jacket off.
He took his jacket off, and he works out, and he looks great. We know
emergence
it's fun.
of a hero. Anyway, what have we got another film?
Can you hear the rain, by the way? Sorry, it's proper
mate.
raining.
It's bad in that shed of yours.
Speaking of listening out to hear what's going on, let's talk about Contact.
This morning's detection of an unidentified radio source from deep space can neither be confirmed nor denied.
Whatever it is, it ain't local.
Position?
I checked interferometry somewhere in Lyra, I think.
Vega?
Can't be. It's only 26 light years away.
I want all these people out of here. Your having sent this announcement all over the world may well constitute a breach of national security.
Boy, this isn't a person-to-person call. This may be an announcement to get our attention.
The president's called an emergency meeting.
You know those interlaced frames that we thought were noise? This has structure.
I'm going to recommend to the president that we militarize this project immediately.
There's no reason to believe that their intentions are hostile.
Contact, 1997, directed by a director who hasn't directed a good film in a very, very long time, Robert Zemeckis. This was interesting. So these were two first-time watches for me. Contact. Now, let me tell you, absolutely stunning piece of filmmaking.
Give us a quick synopsis before we dive in, because I know what happens with this. We all give no synopsis and just talk about why we like it, and that's not going to help anyone.
That's why we've got each other to keep us on track. This follows Ellie Arroway, played by Jodie Foster, who is a radio astronomer, and she receives the first extraterrestrial radio signal ever picked up on Earth. So as the world powers scramble, quite the opposite really of what we've just seen, as the world powers scramble to decipher the message and decide upon a course of action, she must make some decisions between her beliefs, the truth, and reality. So yeah, that one I didn't write myself, but as you can tell,
hashtag science versus religion, and this whole film is about how they can coexist and not actually oppose each other. They can support each other, and I think that's like a really nice viewpoint in this day and age.
It's a nice viewpoint, but there was some people. So this mostly has good reviews, but there were some people that have like completely slated it. So I've just had a cup of tea that's arrived much later than it was supposed to. Thank you. I said to Vicky, "Can I have a cup of tea like 40 minutes in? Would that be all right?" She's like, "Yeah, no problem." But she's been working late.
1 hour, 20 minutes in.
She's like,
fuming.
"I'm so sorry," which is fine. So all that matters is the tea is here. So so some people, this has got pretty good reviews across the board, really. But some people do criticize it for the old, it's religion versus the truth and kind of thing, like, or religion versus science. I'm like, well, that's what the film is.
I'm gonna hit it out. Many moons ago when we started the pod, Jamie made some jokes. I said something like, "Oh, it's intellectual sci-fi," and this genuinely is. Like, if you're here to watch like a fun blockbuster like 90s science fiction film, which is what people think Contact is. They think they're going to get, like, they think of Mission to Mars, they think of Red Planet, they think of like that kind of vibe, or Armageddon, or Deep Impact. This isn't it. Like, this is basically actually a really, in some respects, quite a small scale film with like, sorry, go on, Jamie's pointing his finger in the air.
Carry on. No, I've got the hand up for when you finished. It's a small scale film with...
It's a small scale film, but it's got like very large questions around it and very large production values through use of music, through the use of cinematography, and through like questioning. It's one of those films that make you question things. So it's like, where does science end and where does faith begin? And in the film, it's like, here's two characters. Robert Zemeckis said, look, it can simply be boiled down to, this film has very complicated themes, but also it's just, here's a man who believes in God, here's a woman who doesn't believe in God, who believes in science. How do they coexist in the world, and how do they form a relationship with that? And the film is literally about them opening each other's eyes to like their different viewpoints and accepting that they're both in the search of the knowledge of truth. And like,
very well put, John. Very well put. You've. Do you know what? I'm so glad I didn't interrupt you, because that was really well put. So, an admission: me taking the piss out of John on the Arrival episode for his.
Is that what it was for?
Yeah, I believe so. For his coining of the term intellectual sci-fi, and I basically was like, "Oh, intellectual sci-fi," taking the piss out of him. Right, prepare to feel vindicated, because. I apologise for that, because you know what, you coining that term, I think you're absolutely right, and my fun poking has aged like milk, because I believe that actually you're right, and this is a genre that exists, and I think it's a genre that it's a subgenre that has, well, we see Contact, and I guess we see kind of like 2001, which I still haven't seen, lol, which is probably the beginning of like that intellectual sci-fi, and I think when I've watched this, I'm just sitting there thinking, well, first of all, like we both adored this film, and this is one of my new favourites, of course. I almost put it on my Letterboxd top 4. It's a new favourite, of course, and again, so when I was chasing this cliffhanger vibe, this gave me it, and the reason being was because of the colours used and the score, the whimsical. It's like I immediately like knew the tone of this film was for me. The score like captured me, like it's whimsical, it's grand. It reminded me of Back to the Future, of course, because it's
Alan Silvestri. Yeah,
it's Alan Silvestri. The intrigue of it all, and this had me feeling like the way Cliffhanger made me feel. And so, without sounding wanky, the reason why obviously the film isn't talked about loads, I don't think the film is not that well celebrated, it's not held in the same regard as, I guess, I'm trying to think of other sci-fi films of the time, that there wasn't really much of that time that was like this. And so when you look at films like Interstellar, which is often mentioned in the same breath, and Arrival, really, like, what they've really borrowed from this film in terms of, like, I think there's a lot of, not borrowed, but there is inspiration.
There's crossover.
There.
For sure,
Massive crossover.
If you have any film which is dealing with communicating with aliens or first contact, I suppose there's always going to be some crossover in those ideas of like how the world would respond. Yeah. So like Arrival, I think I love Arrival, and we've already done a whole episode about it. But like Arrival, the book was after this. Did we establish this when I sent it to you? Contact book was the first,
and then Arrival.
Then it was Arrival, but Arrival's a short story and was adapted into a movie. Contact and the book are pretty much the same, aside from the end, because initially there's only, rather than one person go at the end, there was multiple in the book, which I think actually makes more sense, to be honest. But anyway, so in terms of what I like about this film, I first saw this with my dad. I'm going to say it was either late 90s, early 2000s, because
really?
I didn't fully remember it, but it's one of those films where I remember renting it in terms of it came from the video shop and we watched it on a Friday, because that's what we used to do. Friday night was film night. But I have my recollection of it is, you know, when you're a kid, you remember like a scene of a film, and that's how you remember the film. So in my head, like, it was Jodie Foster's in a space outfit and she's flying around space for like 2 hours, and like it's about 10 minutes of the film if that she's like in the astronaut outfit. And I also had an image of her being sat in like a big dome talking to people for ages, which she doesn't do either. So it's really funny, like, again, what you remember / like reality and whatever is interesting. But in the 90s, you've just got this sense of like the score is very orchestral, which is something we see less and less nowadays. And like there's a lovely leitmotif for Jodie Foster's character. Jodie Foster plays Ellie Arroway, who's a scientist, and then basically early on in the film she has like a personal tragedy which sets up the events of like why she like pursues the career she does, and it's like genuinely heartbreaking. We get this like flashback to when she's a little girl. There's incredible direction from Robert Zemeckis. We've got like this amazing sequence. Like, people who haven't seen Contact know about the staircase sequence in the mirror. It's just one of those things where like it's just incredible filmmaking, a mix of like how things are done practically on set, and it's stuff like someone's had an incident in the house. I won't fully go into it, and there's like spilt popcorn on the floor. Robert Zemeckis is so obsessive that the popcorn's in the shape of like the galaxy or Milky Way because the film's.
Well, no, so obviously, the process me and John go through is we essentially watch the film, and then read and watch behind the scenes and interviews with actors, and read as much as we can before the pod, write notes, and then obviously the point of that is hopefully the reason why you enjoy the podcast is that, one, I've heard we have good chemistry, but two, like what the idea is that we want you to learn something when you listen. Like, it's not just two guys being like, oh, that was good, because that's just, there's too much.
Apart from the T2 episode, which was just us going like, that was really good.
Except Terminator 2 episode, because we love that, and probably
sorry,
but you still but we're still talking about well, that runway was actually 5 miles long, blah blah blah, and so you're still gonna learn. You're still gonna learn stuff. And
pepper it with facts.
Yeah,
bit of salt. Anyway,
in a positive way. So that's kind of our
oh my god, I've just seen in the cast list, young Ellie is Jenna Malone.
Yeah, did you not know? Okay.
What?
Yeah.
That has blown my mind.
Yeah. So yeah, for anyone who doesn't know who Jenna Malone is, she was in the Hunger Games, right?
She's in Rebel Moon.
Well,
sorry,
she was in the Hunger Games.
No. She's in lots of things. Yes, she is also in Hunger Games, which is what I've known her for.
You recognise her face.
If you saw her, you know who she is. But anyway.
The mirror scene. So we then go and do behind the scenes. I'm like, oh, John, have you seen this behind the scenes? Blah blah. And we'll just share that with each other, and we try not to talk too much about the film that we've watched and stuff until the pod, so it's a surprise for both of us.
It was hard with this one because we recorded a week late, and also we were quite excited about watching Contact.
We loved it so much. I was like, oh my god, Contact is so good.
I finished it, and then there's a YouTuber I watch who basically does like reactions to films, and I watched her and her sister watch it. And that was like 50 minutes long, so I felt like I'd watched it twice. Yeah. And then on top of that, I just got obsessed with the score. So like I've had that score on repeat for about a week.
Yeah.
And it's just gorgeous, but it's just like it's one of those things where it's at the same time really rousing at the right moments when like they're about to take off and launch, but also it's like quite harrowing and lonely at the same time. But anyway,
well, look, sorry, just
synopsis.
I almost said circle back, but I'm not going to say that because that's what wankers say. I'm going to say I'm going to come back to that point about the mirror scene that we mentioned.
Sorry, yes.
But we looked at the behind the scenes of that, and when the popcorn falls on the floor, it's in the shape of a solar system, as in the popcorn. It creates the stars and stuff, which just those little attention to detail and those little nuggets you see from like behind the scenes. So like there's a shot, for example, like when I was watching the director's commentary, there's a shot that sometimes you just might miss when you're watching it. I've only ever seen this film once actually, but when it cuts from her, Ellie as a little girl, she puts her hair behind her ear, and it cuts to Ellie as an adult, as Jodie Foster, and she also puts her hair behind her ear. So it's a little tick she has.
Visual cue, yeah.
Yeah, like just those little things. Like, but it's just, as John mentioned, like it's just a really well crafted film with great colours.
And again, the use of. There is CG in this, but they have to do a lot of things practically, and like so you've got models integrated with CG, which is the best results. But also like so Ellie is searching. I know we don't fully go into it in full spoilers, but basically Ellie is searching and basically picks up a signal, which is the first idea of ever having contact, i.e. the title, with an alien species, and the film is basically how that gets investigated, and it's all about how the world would come together to respond to that. So of course the Americans find it in the film, and they're like, it's a threat to national security. We're doing it, and basically there becomes like the political arguments of which country should be in charge of the mission, and then basically the film's like a selection process of waiting to see if Ellie's going to be able to get the opportunity to represent humankind, to be the first person, because we're delivered instructions, and the instructions will help us in our mission to find out what's out there. Let's leave it that way.
No, okay, fine. Well, no, I think that because there is some things that we do need to touch upon, like in things that I do want to talk about, such as the terrorist attack and stuff like that.
Great sequence, yeah.
It is kind of like a procedural, isn't it? Really,
yeah.
Like, and then it turns into a mission to outer space.
Yeah, so the first part's very much like Ellie meets Palmer Joss, who's played by, again, I've completely blanked out. It's Matthew McConaughey in this film. In 1997, anyway. And their relationship is he is the as I said, he's the Christian character of the film who's the believer in God, and they have the juxtaposing views, and they spend the film trying to work that out. But the best sequence for me of their dialogue is when, I think they're outside at a president's party, and then she's like, how can this happen? Like, how can you prove there's God? And I asked too many questions at Sunday school and yada yada. And then he says to her, he looks her dead in the eye and he said, so her father's died when she was younger.
Oh, yeah.
So he says to her, did you love your dad? And she's like, yes, of course I do. And then he's like, prove it. And then it's like that whole, she can't, like, how do you physically prove that? And that's his point to her, which is like, I believe in God, like, prove that I'm wrong. And it's like, that's a very interesting point. So he is on the council of representatives of like who will be selecting who will go for the mission to represent humankind. And basically the first time she doesn't make the cut, we're going into more spoilers than normal because we both enjoyed the film, so I'm sorry we're going into it. And basically they set up the first we've received plans to like create a device to be able to go out and meet these creatures out in space. And the plans are like super expensive. Didn't they say it cost like $1 trillion to make it or something?
Oh, I think it's like more than that. But
$3 trillion.
It's $3 trillion. Yeah.
Like the Japanese come in and they provide certain things, and the Chinese provide certain things, but they have to agree like all these different deals around the world to keep everyone happy, and they want a representative to go and yada yada.
That would take years.
Yeah, I know.
Age, like.
But anyway, they sort it, and then Ellie goes on this journey. Now, the reason this film gets lots of comparisons to Interstellar is because it's similar themes, which is the idea of love in general transcends time and space, which I know sounds really pretentious and really grim, but it's actually a really nice idea. In Interstellar, there's a whole sequence where I've forgotten her character's name, but Anne Hathaway's talking about the idea of like people love people after they've died, and that's not. Yeah, in Interstellar.
Interstellar, sorry.
And she talks about the idea of like Matthew McConaughey in that film is actually the scientist, so roles reversed. He's not the believer in God. And he kind of says, well, I believe that everything that humans do, like love or whatever, is to enable like society to exist. So like you look after your kids because you love that. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like to make sure they get looked after and the human race continues. And she's like, yeah, but what's the point of still loving something after it's died? Like, what benefit is it to society then? Like, how does that help? Do you know what I mean? As a mammal, like, what does that do? Like, nothing.
Yeah.
So, love transcends all. And this film has a similar theme because Jodie Foster as Ellie is a hardened scientist, and then by the end of the film, she has to take a leap of faith, quite literally, to be able to make the discovery that she goes on to make in this film. And the scientists say, for example, like, when you launch, we've got you in this chair, and she's like, they've sent plans and they've told us not to do this. And it's like, if she followed the science, which is to stay in the chair and not what the aliens or whatever told her to do, then she would have died because the chair breaks. And she's saved by something that's given to her by Palmer Joss, played by Matthew McConaughey, because he says, I believe that this will guide you back home, and it's a compass, and like the compass saves her life because she ejects out of the chair because she's trying to catch it. There's all these. Yeah. I'm doing a bad job of describing this, but
no, I don't think you are. No, I think you are kind of nailing it.
It's hard to get your head around, but yeah, it's a
difficult film to discuss because it's so.
It's large in scale as well. It feels like it's got three parts. Like the first part's kind of like, here's the traumatized childhood of why I ended up where I am.
Yeah.
Here's me making basically the biggest discovery of my life, and here's the stage where the world is literally being turned upside down, and it's like, what would happen? And then you get the conclusion, which we won't fully go into.
No.
Where it's kind of like the aftermath of that.
It's quite difficult.
What it means.
Like, there's some difficult scenes in it. Like there's a really sad scene when she does lose her dad, and she's calling her dad on the
CQ.
Yeah.
Off the tone.
It's really sad.
God.
Zemeckis walked so Nolan could run. Trust me.
But it is frustrating, I must say. Like Zemeckis is just like absolutely on it in this. Just the choreography in terms of like the blocking, it's up there with Spielbergian. Like honestly, it's just
I think Zemeckis at his best is just as good as anyone out there.
There's so many key sequences in terms of like where the blocking's so well done, and also like when they first get the message and the way the score kicks in, like she's driving in the car screaming down, and like it's that 90s kind of, we've made the scientific discovery and everyone's running around the computer, oh, you're recording it, like smacking it, smacking the screen to make sure you record it. But just the energy it creates for that discovery, you don't fully understand what's happening, but you know something big's happening, so you just get fully invested in it. It's just an incredible feeling they stir with that, and I just feel like I've not felt that in a film for a very long time.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's weird because like Zemeckis is like, he went on a run of like an unbelievable run, like one of the all-time greats. Romancing the Stone is fine, like it is what it is, like it's enjoyable, but I wouldn't say it's a great film. But he obviously did Back to the Future, then Roger Rabbit, then Back to the Future 2 and 3, Death Becomes Her, Forrest Gump, Contact, What Lies Beneath, which is alright, Castaway, and The Polar Express, which I know that some people love The Polar Express.
Yeah, it's not for me.
But then he did Beowulf, A Christmas Carol, that were fine, Flight, which was good. But then since then, like this,
he did Flight.
Yeah, with Denzel. This run he's been on since.
It's not what I thought it was.
Probably 2000. He's not made a good film since 2012. Really, Allied is okay, but then he's made Pinocchio was not good. His newest one is awful, and it's just a bit of a shame, really. Like, I'd love him to get back to. I say what he's good at. He's got a very varied filmography. It's actually remarkable, to be honest. But yeah, he's just seemed to have lost the magic a little bit, which is a shame. But yeah, I'm obsessed with this film. This is going to be a constant rewatch for me. And the performances as well are good. It's got.
I haven't even mentioned that Jodie Foster has a scene in Congress where she's got to give testimony, and it's like actually heartbreaking. Yeah. Like she's just basically. It flips where she's the one who asks people to put faith in her and believe something, because she doesn't have scientific proof, and it's just like, oh my god.
James Woods in this is an absolute tit, and he normally is anyway in film, but it feels like throughout this whole film, Ellie's character is constantly questioned and kind of overthrown and that kind of thing, and she's the biggest expert in that field with telescopic satellites, but it just seems that there seems to be a man that comes in like constantly,
shouts her down,
and be like, either steal her idea, shouts her down. Can we talk about the colours of this film, please?
So
go for it, John.
In stark contrast to War of the Worlds, which is 2005, so let's say it's about 10 years difference ish between these two, and then this film has like that very old school filmic look, not only because it was shot on film, but just the base of like the colours in it. It's very vibrant, it's very saturated, and like also I think 90s films had a certain amount of optimism in them, which I feel like makes such a difference as well. Like it's an optimistic tone of being like, you know, the start of this film is literally like you hear mass noise of a radio and it like zooms out of Earth, and you go further and further and further and further back and realise like how small we are really in the grand scheme of like the universe.
Insignificant.
And it makes your mind boggle, because you're like, we're little ants down here. But anyway, and like when the way everything is shot and captured, like everything's lit in quite a traditional sense, and what I mean by that is, yes, there's motivated lighting, but there's a lot of like, hey, this is brighter than it would be, but actually I can see what's going on at all times, and it just looks like beautiful. There's some good CG in this, because there's bits where they've like cropped in President at the time, Bill Clinton, from footage that was different, and then like changed his outfit, and it's just like really smartly done. They'd obviously learnt these tricks from Forrest Gump, where they'd implemented like archival news footage in with like Forrest throughout. But just watching films that are vibrant and colourful now is so like, there's just something about it, because it's so different to what we see. There's been a trend in modern films, and like this is a bit of a generalisation, but overall there's been a trend of things getting more and more desaturated and like more contrasty, or more, well, not almost more contrasty, sorry, sometimes flatter. And there's been an argument of, has this been done and lit differently and darkly to implement CG, so you can hide CG better with like darker lighting? And actually, we've talked about this before. If you make a stylized decision of like how a lighting looks, to make your CG conform to how that light looks is really difficult. But if it's flat across the board and there's less creative decisions made, it's easier to replicate in a computer, and then you can kind of dial in the image to adjust around that. Whereas in the 90s, it was kind of like, we've shot it to look like this, and then we're going to add the effects onto it. It's like just a different way of viewing it. And also, this is back when you actually had to lock in and plan before you filmed. We're not doing the kind of Star Wars prequel started, as I hate to say, where we can film it on green screen and change it at any point because in the post process we can adapt it. This was, you'd boarded something out, you've made the model for it, you go and do that, and then you add CG on top, and then boom, off you go. And that's the main difference, really. But War of the Worlds, I mean, does a good job of implementing practical and physical effects in with CG, but we said it's completely different idea where it's so desaturated that it doesn't look like reality. But I think it's trying to say in the 2000s, and I probably sound old now saying in the 2000s, but when I was growing up, everything had a dark, gritty version remake of it. So there was a trend after Casino Royale. Now, Casino Royale was a dark and gritty film, but actually, like, colour-wise, it's a really vibrant Bond film. It's very, very punchy and saturated, and like it's a gorgeous-looking film. But like Dark Knight was like muted colours, everything's orange.
2005, wasn't it? 2005 was around the time where it all started happening.
I don't know if that was to do with digital colour grading as well, where it was taking off more and more. Because I know the first.
Yeah, because Collateral. So Collateral would in 2004 actually was when Michael Mann used a mixture because we covered the Collateral a few episodes ago.
He did film and
digital and film, because digital looked better in the dark. But yeah, so that could be the reason why, if digital was taken off.
But in terms of like they were scanning in one of the first ones I remember we talked about was it's the Odyssey film with
the
George Clooney and thingy, and I've forgotten it. But anyway, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And that was good for me.
Well,
and that was
good for me on my film podcast.
Yeah, that was digitally colour graded, even though it was shot on film. It wasn't the first one, but it was an example of one that had been done. And then I think the trend was to push the looks more and more and more. But yeah, it's just a. I personally prefer seeing those old films where they didn't have that option, like your Jurassic Parks, because actually the truth is they probably feel more realistic, or what our brain perceives as being realistic, because those are the films we've seen for a longer period of time. Yeah. So I went to send you a video today. It's about modern colour grading takes you out of films, because it showed a behind the scenes clip of Jurassic World, and they're jumping into a pool of water, and the water's like dark brown and the grass is green. But then they changed it to the teal and orange look. So teal and orange look is literally you get two opposing colours on a colour spectrum. So light blue and light orange. Now on a Pantone, they're a perfect like kind of opposite. So there's like trends of films that have.
They're not. Sorry.
Sorry. So your skin tones are super orange, and then you get this amazing contrast by having this kind of saturated blue.
Yeah.
Difference, but it's such a stylized look. It looks like a video game, and it looks fake. So the behind the scenes showed like the real colours, and it looked so much more realistic because it wasn't colour graded to buggery. And again, it's interesting because actually that's not an issue of darkness, which is what we've just raised, but about saturation. Actually, that is a saturated film, but it's hyper saturated to look fake. What you're missing is the days when the film stock was just like, this is what green looks like, this is what red looks like, and you had to pick your location and your all your mise en scène, like the clothes you wore, all those things to match that film stock and mood, and then you were locked into that. And then as soon as they changed that and gone away from it, it just it feels less authentic. Things feel too clean these days, which is usually an issue with digital. But it's just interesting watching a film like this, which is like peak power of film.
You see
and
a lot
integrated
of,
with digital.
Yeah, it's a lot of the colours they use, like the primary colours of their clothes. Like she's wearing a bright red jacket at some point. We see her wearing blues, like, and it just
pops.
It pops and it looks lovely. It's a shame that we don't. I've said it 3 episodes in a row now. We don't get films like this anymore, really.
I really, really want to watch. Sorry, completely random. From what you said earlier, you said about Cube, and I said Sphere. I've seen a trailer for Sphere. I really want to watch that for the pod at some point now. And there's other films like that era where they kind of cross
Sphere's
into
not the
early
one
2000s.
Circle.
It's Dustin Hoffman,
Okay.
Samuel L. Jackson, and Sharon Stone.
Really?
Mate, see what I mean? Like
Sounds
we've got to give that a watch. Anyway, have we got any more questions about Contact we want to get over? Let's do it.
Yeah, so last couple of questions and some pretty good ones where people will decide whether they want to carry on listening or not. So we've got two similar ones, so we'll probably answer them same together. So David Ellis writes in and says, aliens and UFOs, do you think they exist? Would you like them to exist? So,
wow.
Aliens and UFOs, do you think they exist? Would you like them to exist? So, in terms of an unidentified flying object, yeah, I guess I do think they exist. And
Such a get out of jail free card, isn't it? To be like, well, if it is just unidentified flying object, then yes, I believe in them because there are always unidentified flying things.
I think we're crazy to think that the size. If we acknowledge the size of the universe,
it's awful waste of space to think it's just us.
It is, yeah. So
as Eddie says in the film,
of course, I do believe that. I do think aliens exist. Because they have to, I guess, or some kind of version of them. If we think that the word alien just means not us, I guess, like, as in, I don't.
It could be literally be like a little biological form in terms of like a microbe.
Do I think that there's things out there that are way more advanced than us? I mean, the chances are pretty high. The chances are very high because if you think about like how small we are and how big the universe is, we're a grain of sand on the Sahara, so the chances of like something similar being out there, probably there could be an exact same human race. Do you know what I mean? Like it could be exactly.
That would be wild.
It would, but there could be that could exactly happen, I think. So yeah, I do think they exist. Do I think that the government are like covering it up and all that kind of thing? Like, they could, I guess. Like, where does Area 51 come? I don't know. I'm not really a conspiracy theorist at all, but I do think there's some crazy things in the sky that they have reported on. But also, like, there's so much AI and videos out there now. Like, I don't know what to believe. So, I think they probably exist through the power of probability. And would I like them to exist? No, I would not. No, I would not, because I think that it would scare the hell out of me to think that we could get an invasion. And that maybe. So, John, what about you? Do you think aliens exist? And would you? So,
there's a really, really good. I don't normally promote Stephen Bartlett's podcast on here, but here we go. So,
we don't promote him on here actually, because
there is an interview.
Our podcast is sponsored by.
Yeah, we know. There's an interview where he did with Luis Elizondo, who was talking about when he worked for. He's released a book which is about when he was looking into UAPs. Which is like what they now call UFOs.
Unidentified
aerial presence or something. Something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, cool.
And he released what he could release, and then lots of it was redacted. Classic. Wow. Who knows how much of it is true, but I tell you what, it was an entertaining watch for 2 hours.
I think that's the guy that said he'd seen aliens and stuff, wasn't it? Is that guy?
No. He's not someone who said he's seen them. He basically said that he kind of had to investigate when they were unidentified flying, whatever you want to call them, over airspace. And like there was the drone thing recently when everyone was like, there's loads of drones, are they drones? But look,
what do you think?
I don't believe they're here now or any of that kind of like, the X-Files, like they're all here and they're in government.
You don't think they're underneath the ground?
I don't believe in the X-Files kind of like, they're in the president's cabinet room and they look like us, or they're lizards, the classic.
No, I'm not even joking.
I've heard all the lizard story stuff, mate.
I've got a friend that does think there's like the like people in the US cabinet are lizards and shit.
Well, there you go. Well, if they are, good on them. But anyway, so no, I don't believe that.
Are they?
But God. But no, what I would say is, in terms of like, as Jamie said, seems to me stupid to say or rule out like categorically we are the only things that exist in the entire universe. That just seems very implausible to me, or implausible. But anyway, it seems very unlikely to me that is the case. However, do I think in my lifetime we'll know any different? Probably not, and probably not for many more, because don't know. Would you want to come and find Earth? In terms of like, if you actually could keep an eye on us from very, very far away and all the things we get up to, you probably wouldn't be that in a rush to kind of ingratiate yourselves to us.
I often think that we could be like I often think that the planet and the universe, the whole universe, the solar system could also be just like a little grain of sand on the desert, like, and be like a little micro kind of, and there could be giants, like, I don't know, like we could be, do you know what I mean, like that kind of thing.
The maddest one I saw the other day, and this was when you've been scrolling on Instagram for too long, and it was like, I'm starting to believe the Matrix is real, because if we're at the point where AI is creating images and video that is so fake it literally looks real, then it's not too far a step for me to believe that everything is not real or whatever. So I was like, oh my god.
You need to watch, there's a documentary called, I think it might even be called Enter the Matrix, where it's actual conspiracy theories of that this could be the Matrix and this could be scripted AI. Like our lives and stuff, but I don't.
Wild.
I'm not saying I believe that, by the way. So
Absolutely wild.
It exists. Patch says, and the last question of
I can't believe we got onto this tangent, to be honest. But anyway, whatever.
Do you think
we're here now?
Still alive?
No, I don't.
He's living in Costa Rica. Patch writes in and says, "Do you believe in aliens?" We've just established that.
We've had enough about that, but yeah, go on.
If you do, why would they visit? And if they visited, would it be a peaceful first contact or hostile?
I've literally just said that they don't want to visit because they see what we get up to and they just think, none of that for me, thank you. I think maybe it's like in Star Trek. You remember like the Federation, like if they can't do like warp capable flights, they're not warp ready, then they're not ready to be approached by us because their civilization is too, like, they spend too much time fighting all this stuff. Like,
primitive.
Yeah, primitive, that's the word. Maybe it's like that. Who knows? We don't meet the criteria.
Anyway. That's what we do as well. Like,
we do. That's my point.
Yeah,
like, yeah.
I often have quite... There's some really lovely things in the world and stuff, but I often do have little faith in the human race as well for lots of reasons. But the whole... Do I think that... Why would they visit us? I mean, I've got no idea. Maybe they'd visit to listen to the Movies in a Podshall podcast, and buy
to get those cotton t-shirts.
And maybe they'd buy pre-shrunk cotton t-shirts that are responsibly sourced that are £18 on moviesinapodshall.sumupstore.com. But would it be a peaceful first contact or hostile? And that's the reason why I would answer David's question with, would I like them to exist? I don't think it would be. I think it would be hostile. I do. Because if you think about...
I don't think it is. I think it'd be so...
You don't think it'd be hostile?
I tell you what, I honestly think it's a bit like Contact. I think they'd probably look and be like, what are you... What, look, yeah, look from afar. What's going on here? Like, okay, right. Don't really want to be involved with that. Come to us in another 1,000 years when you've cracked this and come back.
Do you think, or do you think maybe they would? It would be like a Rebel Moon scenario where they'd come and take all of our crops,
take the grain, and we'd have to chop in a field in slow motion.
I wouldn't want them to exist really, because I'd say, do I say I'm happy with the planet as it is? I guess not really. I think so. I've often said, and this we'll leave the pod on this really depressing note.
Oh God!
Is that I've said for ages that I think we are probably maybe 30 or 40 years away from like a lot of the world not existing, because I do think that we're gonna have some kind of nuclear war at some point, and someone is gonna press a button, and it would. And no, I do, because if you think about like how rapid technology, I feel like this has gone a bit Joe Rogan.
It really has. God, go on.
If you think about how rapid technology is, like the trajectory of it, we've gone from like being on a slope in like the 80s and 90s to like being like vertical on like what we can achieve now with AI and all that kind of stuff. And so with the whole nuclear stuff, like that terrifies me, because I do think that there's a lot of like really powerful people that are in charge at the moment that can't necessarily be trusted. And I know people would say that that's been happening for years, and yeah, maybe it has, but I do think that there's like it would take just something like that just to wipe out half of the world, which would be...
It does, but it still goes down to the theory of mutually assured destruction, right, though? Which is still the basis of like no one wins.
But anyway,
like,
thanks
literally.
for tuning in.
I can't believe we got that dark. All I'd say is, and I hope we can take the message from Contact, which is actually like, maybe if people spend so much time looking out there to see like if we're alone in the universe, and actually you realise that you're not alone here. So just focus on that. Make it a better place here first, and then we'll worry about the rest of it.
Listen,
okay?
we do the pod. We will leave you on a positive note. Yeah, John's right. It's just about kind of trying to live a good life and being good to each other and being kind to each other. So if we do a bit more of that, then I think we'll be okay, you know.
Because we're not going to be able to stop the madman with a nuke. Anyway.
We won't know. But yeah, John, right, I guess it's probably time to go. I think our next episode should be with... So this one's going to be releasing early because we're late. But the next episode should be with Jane, and we're going to be talking probably a little bit about the Oscars and our favourite top 10 films of 2024, where John's probably going to be a slight bit of a passenger.
Give the 4 films I saw last year.
Yeah. But he'll be like, well, what about this banger from 2005? But John, where can they find you? What are you going to be doing?
jcb.video.
You doing anything fun? Filming anything fun at the moment?
Anything I can talk about? Well, hold on. Let me actually see if there's anything I can actually talk about. Let's do a very quick whiz through. Okay. I am doing some fun filming for the Six Nations at the weekend, which is the first England game, and it's just some promotional stuff because Guinness and stuff.
Doing Guinness.
I think I can say that.
Good, mate. Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, brilliant. What a cracking drink, eh? We're allowed to say positive things about Guinness. Cool. Yeah. You can find us on Movies in a Podshall. We're getting quite a bit of traction on the old Instagram at the moment. We had one of our video I posted about. Oh God, we didn't even talk about David Lynch.
We didn't.
No.
Let's do that.
We'll talk about David Lynch next pod. Probably,
okay, you want to prep properly. That's fair.
Yeah, I'd rather prep properly, but yeah. So
no stress.
I posted a little David Lynch, one of my favourite ever clips, and it done really well. For the first time ever, we got, I think we got like 15,000 views on it, which was really good. Mm-hmm. So that's good, John. I'm just trying to work hard on the pod. But yeah, so find us there. You can write into us at moviesinapodshall@gmail.com. You can write into us at the Movies in a Podshall Instagram. Yeah, tell us what you like, what you dislike, and yeah, we're always open to feedback as long as it's good. And you can find us on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Subscribe to us, like us, give us 5 stars. We only accept 5 stars, which I haven't said in a while, because if you give us anything less, we'll disregard it. So, John, I guess you could say goodbye if you want, or if you've got anything else to say.
I'm gonna quote Ellie and say, "Good to go. Good to go."
Okay.
I'm good to go.
Cool. See ya.
I'm good to go.